outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hello, and welcome to my show. This is actually my first one for 2026. I hope you've all missed the show and Happy New Year, even though we're in February. But I was doing quite a bit of traveling. So I think the last time I spoke to you all, I was just about to head off to Mauritius. And then I also went to Dublin over the New Year and then to Amsterdam. So I've just been, off traveling everywhere. And it's been really nice. And actually, when I came back in January, I went to the BET education show at the Excel as well. And because TTR had a stand there. So I met some of my colleagues at TTR in person for the first time, which was really nice. It was, I've been doing this for a good 6 months now, but I hadn't actually met any of the other presenters in person. So that was quite nice. And I always forget how big the Excel is. It's absolutely huge. I was like, I'll just come and find the stand. And then I realized like how massive the place is. But it feels like it's been all go because we were wrapping up for Christmas last time we spoke. And now I feel like I've been straight into the flow of term 2. And I think for me, this is the busiest time of year for me, like term 2, between probably, I would say, January and maybe March, April. It's like I've got all the marking from term 1, but all the lecture prep for term 2. So it just feels like a lot of stuff at the same time. But I've been doing it for such a long time that I'm sort of used to it now. And so I've got these 2 big batches of marking to get done at the moment. I know all of you who have lots of marking to do will understand the boat that I'm in. And I've got like lectures and workshops to prepare for. But I'm watching plenty of trash TV in between, so it makes it all very, very bearable. Anyway, let's get into today's show. I have my guest, Rebecca Pearce, here with me. She is my colleague at the London College of Communication. She's a senior lecturer and your course leader as well, aren't you, Rebecca?
Yeah, I'm a course leader at LCC, part of UAL.
Great. So how are you, Rebecca?
I'm fine, thanks, Seema. Yeah, looking forward to a good chat about, we're going to talk about coaching this evening. So one of my favourite subjects.
Great. And so I haven't actually seen you this year either. I don't think I've bumped into you since we've come back, but Rebecca and I how long have we known each other? Like probably a couple of years, maybe?
I think the last couple of years, yes. Yeah. And we've moved in sort of similar circles and we've got similar interests in the higher education field. So that's kind of where our conversations have come from, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember I was presenting at the education conference last year and you were presenting right before me and you were talking about coaching. And that was when I sort of realized that we have this shared interest in coaching, which was great. So where did your interest in coaching come from? And, I think you were working on a qualification in coaching at UAL when you did the presentation. So tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back a little bit in that I'm a former broadcast journalist. So we also share an interest in radio. I love radio and love broadcasting. And I then went into lecturing in journalism. And as you say, I'm now a senior lecturer and the course leader of BA journalism course at LCC. And I think my interest in coaching came first from having been coached. I'd been coached a couple of times during my career, way back when I was still a journalist and was considering a change of career, and also more recently, because we're lucky enough to have a coaching network at our university, so it's available to all staff. So I'd had a coach and sort of seen how transformative it could be, I suppose, and how useful it could be. And that got me thinking about the parallels between coaching and teaching and how it could apply to teaching. And so I then decided to undertake my own qualification. So I did that through the university because they offer a level 5 coaching professional apprenticeship. So I studied that over about a sort of 18 months period, and finished last summer. So I'm now a qualified professional coach, and a member of the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. And I now can take on coaching clients within UAL. For the moment, I'm just sort of part of that coaching network. But it's also something that I apply to all areas of my work, I would say, both as a line manager and also as a personal tutor and a lecturer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's brilliant and fascinating at the same time. I mean, it's good that you were coached first, and that was sort of what got your attention and drew you towards it. But also, it's interesting that you pursued the qualification because you saw the parallels with teaching. So, and in terms of like where maybe there could be crossover and I guess beneficial aspects in terms of integrating the two. Yeah, I actually engaged with the coaching network very recently as well, and I just because I always say this, I'm like, just like therapists need therapists, I think coaches need coaches. And so I thought it would be really interesting for me to take up some coaching. And I feel like you learn so much from being coached.
Yeah.
And yeah, what was your sort of experience like when you undertook it?
So the experience of being coached, it was really interesting to understand a little bit more about the process and the questioning process, and the way that coaching, I think, hands the onus to the coachee. Particularly the person who coached me, the way that they have been trained and the way that they approached it was that, each session they would say, what do you want to bring to today's session? What do you want to talk about? And I would sort of, mention either perhaps, long-term or short-term goals or things that have been happening at work. And she would say, right, how much time do you want to spend on that? And how much on this? And would try and keep the conversation to time. So almost kind of chairing and keeping you to an agenda. And then we might overspill and she'd say, well, do you want to keep on talking about this now, or do you want to leave enough time to address the other issue that you wanted to bring? And so just that kind of process of realizing that somebody was keeping an eye on the conversation and trying to guide you through it, and the kind of questions, the incisive questions. And that's when I also started to see the parallels with journalism as well, because obviously journalism is all about asking those incisive questions and trying to get the best out of people a lot of the time. And it felt like I sort of had a similar skill set already, and that perhaps I could use it in that area.
Yeah, I agree. I think I feel like the things that really jump out for me in terms of skills of a really good coach are, yes, that ability to ask really good questions, and then that ability to listen. I feel like they're both so fundamental to coaching. But it's funny because there's so many terms that fly around, right? Coaching, therapy, counseling. And I feel, and there's so many different types of coaches, right? Business coach, life coach, sports coach, all these different, types of coaches. And I think that there's a lot of, I think people have a lot of questions about like, well, what is coaching? And, what kind of coach are we talking about here? And I feel like, I don't know about you, but I feel like coaching is it's like a skill and a tool, and it can be applied to any context or any field. So yes, you as a coach might have, a specialism based on experience. So all of the kind of clients that I have are in a corporate context, and so that's where I specialize. But in terms of the actual coaching skills themselves, I feel like they're almost universal, and then they can apply to sort of any setting. Would you agree with that, or what do you?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's interesting when you try and explain what coaching is. And I still have friends who think that I've done a counselling course and say, oh, you must be a great counsellor. And I say, well, it's similar, but it's different. And the way that I have explained it, or tried to sort of split it up into the different roles to people, is that I would describe coaching as you're being a thinking partner. And you're giving somebody time to reflect and explore ideas. But there's obviously a lot of listening involved. But I think the main thing is that coaching is forward focused, and it's very, in the context in which we work, it's very non-directive. Obviously, a sports coach, I would expect that they would be telling somebody what to do. In the environment in which we work, it's very important that it's non-directive, that you're not giving advice. And that you're sort of working towards specific goals. So if you were to sort of think about what a mentor would be, and a mentor might be somebody who's not trained, but they may work in a similar role, or a senior role in a similar industry to you, or maybe in a role that you'd like to aspire to. And a mentor might sort of focus on their own advice and their own networks and help with your career advancement. Whereas a coach may not know anything about your particular area or role, but they're just there to ask the questions and to draw out your knowledge and to draw out your self-knowledge as well, and to help with those future goals. And I think sort of in between those is the counselling role, where they're going to be focusing on emotional change. And perhaps with counselling, the focus might be more about past trauma or past events and making sense of those. Whereas always try to make coaching as kind of, of course, people are going to bring up things that have happened in their past, but the focus should be very much on the future and what you want to get out of the future and the goals that you're working towards. So yeah, that's, I think, how I distinguish between them.
Yeah, no, thanks for making those distinctions. I think it's really helpful, because I feel like, there are a lot of sort of misconceptions around the differences and what coaching is and isn't. And I think, if we bring it back to the context of teaching, I think one of the things about coaching that is so interesting is that you aren't there to provide answers, and you're there to sort of guide the other person to find their own. And I think what's really nice about that is that it creates it takes us away from dependence, right, on the coach to have all the answers for us and to solve all of our problems for us, right? And it reminds us that actually we have all the answers, we just need to have the time and the space to get to them. And I think that is quite interesting if we think about it in an educational context, because I feel like it's really easy to fall into giving students answers. And there's almost like it's already, there's this sort of expectation that because of this like power dynamic or hierarchy, that the teachers are here and the students are down here, and the teachers have all the answers and we're the fountain of knowledge, and the students are there to like learn from us. And I think it poses a very interesting question about what is our role. Is it to give all the answers and be that kind of fountain of knowledge, or is it to guide students towards finding those answers out for themselves? Actually, it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, which I'm going to get completely wrong now. But when I did my own undergraduate dissertation, I remember I started it off with this quote because I loved it, and it was like something along the lines of the teacher who is indeed wise does not bid the student to enter, their kingdom of wisdom, but it guides them. Oh my God, I knew this would happen. It guides them to their own mind or finding their own answers. I knew this would go so wrong. But basically, it was saying that, it's inviting them to enter the threshold of their own mind. So basically, like go and find the answer rather than thinking that I've got all the answers and come to me and I will educate you, sort of thing. And I really like that. I think that while it's very tempting for us to give all the answers, I think there's a real discipline in sort of holding back and going and asking a question sometimes, right? And I guess that's what coaching is. It's these insightful questions and leading the student to think a bit more and not become dependent on you for the answers. Because I think when you have a few rounds of that, it starts to create a realization in the person or in the student that actually, I don't really need to ask. I think I can figure this out for myself.
Well, that's certainly the goal. And I think it's very, very relevant, everything you've said, to higher education, but can also apply to students or pupils still at school or at college, further education as well. But it is that idea that you want to build resilient students who can be problem solvers. And I think we are all aware, working in this sector, that we're dealing with a lot of anxiety from young people and a lot of perhaps lack of confidence in making their own decisions. And it is tempting in those situations to become the rescuer. And as you say, teachers are used to, or perhaps we're put in that role of handing down the answers, and that there is always a right answer. And of course, as you go through education, you want your students to become independent learners. You want them to find answers for themselves, and you want them to find the answers that work for themselves, particularly when you're thinking about life skills and future careers and how they're going to adapt the skills that they've got. And the students that we have, asking lots of questions about their own futures. We can't possibly have all the answers, but we can help them, I think, to find and discover some of those answers and discover some of those strengths for themselves, just by leading them through some of those questions, and by handing the baton back and saying, well, what do you think? What do you want from this? What do you want to do? And giving them a bit of time and space to discuss and to think about that, rather than saying, well, I know what you should do, or you should do this, or my advice would be, if I was in your situation, or worse still, which I think can be a habit amongst teachers, when I was your age, what I did was this, or if I were you, I would do that. And we know times have changed, and what we might have done when we were undergraduates or when we were at school, we were growing up in a different world, and those our answers wouldn't necessarily apply anymore. So it's up to us to help guide students to find their own answers.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So just a reminder that this show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning. They are publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. So if you want to level up your professional development today, you can visit www.hachetlearning.com and explore their full range of titles. You should also be aware that Teachers Talk Connect is back for 2026. It's the annual CPD and networking extravaganza. So if you want to join the TTR team, It's happening on Saturday, the 14th of March in Manchester. The tickets are free, so you can grab yours at ttradio.org/connect 2026. Good stuff. I think, the point that you made about, young people experiencing a lot of anxiety, I think it's really interesting because I've been reading about how teachers are facing a lot of anxiety and I guess a lot of pressure as well. And I just wonder, are we placing more pressure on teachers that are already, overwhelmed, if we start saying, start learning and using coaching skills in your classroom and, we should be doing more of this? Or is it actually going to eventually help to alleviate some of that pressure? Like, what's your perspective on that? Because just for context, in the last show, we were talking about how, we were talking about teachers as sort of entertainers, and our colleague, who you also know, Konstantinos, was with me, and he had some great stories, and he was talking about how we should be like actors and clowns, and it's really important in terms of student engagement. But it feels like everything's important, right? But is all of this too much pressure on the teacher if we're now saying, understand and learn coaching skills and do this too?
I would really hope that coaching skills, there are some simple techniques that actually I think anyone could integrate into conversations with students that I would hope would take some of the pressure off, because you talked about anxiety and teachers' anxiety and lecturers' anxiety, and that's a very real thing. And I think the anxiety that I have felt and my colleagues have felt in the past is that we're not doing enough and we don't have the answers, and sometimes our students come to us with problems that we cannot solve. And as a teacher, obviously, it's our instinct. It can feel, you want to solve this, you want to be able to help. But to say to a student, well, look, I don't know, but let's work on this together. Let's think this through. What do you think? What about this? And there are, various techniques and frameworks for doing that, and suggested questions. And I think the joy in that is you watch somebody, a student, a colleague, who might come up with their own solution and go, actually, I suppose I could do this. And I hadn't thought about that. And it's just by having a bit of time and space, or sometimes just somebody saying, well, you've mentioned that. Why don't you do that? Why haven't you done that? And possibly the barrier that they've presented is not necessarily a real barrier, or it's something that you can talk through. What I always say to colleagues when I talk about using coaching is that obviously if a student is in distress, if a student is coming to you with a very difficult problem, we can't fix it, and that is when we really look to refer a student to specialist services. Coaching is not going to solve those immediate crises, and that's not what we're here for. And sometimes some of our students need the involvement of mental health professionals, or they need counselling, or so on. But I do think there are sort of other issues within that academic realm, or anxieties, if you like, that you can talk through and unpick a little bit. And a student is more likely to act on a solution that they have found themselves, rather than an answer that you have given them. Whatever they say to your face, and I'm sure we've had that experience of, yes, I'm definitely going to go and do, yes, thank you very much, I will do that. And you discover further down the line that actually they didn't take your advice and they didn't contact that person or do the thing. But what you hope is that if it's come from within, if it's come from them, they are much, much more likely to act on it and to find their own solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. There is a lot of pressure on teachers to have all the answers. And I think that can definitely be a cause of anxiety for teachers. And I think you're right that sometimes if you can just sort of have a shared approach and say, okay, well, let's try and explore this a little bit. You know, maybe it's not as simple as a question and an answer. And I think what we're saying here is that you don't need to become a fully qualified coach to practice coaching skills in your classroom, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think what we should do now is, because we discussed this a little bit off air, is there's one particular coaching model that is quite, once you get your head around it, it's quite a simple one to remember and execute, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's something that we all already naturally sort of do sometimes in conversation, but perhaps not in, you know, a particular order. And but also, I don't know about you, Rebecca, but I remember the first time that I used this. The thing that I realized is how hard it is to not jump in with an answer or a piece of advice, and actually to hold back my own opinions and my own sort of judgments and ask a question instead. Because I feel like, you know, we do all sort of rush to advise, especially when we care. Especially when we care, we want to sort of say, oh no, but why don't you try this? And why don't you do that? But there's something really powerful in holding back, because when you give it the time and you ask questions and then you observe someone coming to that answer themselves, it's really quite powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is that having to bite your tongue when you start doing coaching. Biting your tongue, whatever it takes, not to jump in. There is a well-known coach who's authored lots of books called Michael Bungay Stanier, and he calls it the advice monster. You know, that we all have that advice monster within us. And as I sort of mentioned before, you know what you should do, and this is what I would do. And as soon as you let the advice monster out, then you've stopped coaching. So yes, it's a difficult thing, but it's also actually the simplest thing. Just to, you know, I say to people, shut up and listen. Just shut up and listen. Just, you know, don't jump in. Don't assume you have the answer. Don't listen to students and just think about what you're going to say. Actually, really, really listen actively. But yes, we do. We have a framework that we could share that I hope might be helpful to people listening, that they might be able to use in their own practice.
Absolutely. So how about this? So I think, why don't you talk us through the framework, and then we can sort of role play. So I'll be the student, you can be the coach or the teacher, whatever. And I was actually, I was doing my own master's not long ago, like last year. So hopefully it won't be too hard for me to get back into the mindset. Yeah, I'm not sure how this is going to work out, but let's try it. Let's give it a go and see where this goes.
Let's see where it goes and see. Yeah. So we're going to try using the GROW framework, which is very well known within the coaching community, and I think in business as well, you know, and it's something that line managers are often taught to use because it is so simple and so straightforward. It was developed by a man called Sir John Whitmore in the 1980s, and I think originally based on some the ideas from sports coaching, but then he took it into that kind of business and that work environment. And the reason it's called GROW is that isn't just the eventual aim. It's also what you are. It's the acronym that tells you what you should do. So the G is for goal. So asking somebody what the goal is. What do they want? The R is for reality. So you have a look at what is actually happening now and examine that. O is for options. So then it's kind of looking and balancing up what could happen, what might the person want to do. And then the W, well, in my use of GROW, it stands for will, as in what will you do next and how strong is your will to do that. Other people say W is for what next. So what were you going to do? And other people
forward. That's
Yeah.
what I'm supposed to. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. The W represents different things.
Yeah, and others say it's for wrap up. So
Stage, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a what do you want? Where are you now? What could you do? What will you do? It's the sort of framework, and we can see this in the conversation we have. As we know, the way you want to be in your current reality can get mixed up, and so it's not a framework is just there as guidance. It's not there as you absolutely have to only talk about the goal and then only talk about the reality. There's there can often be a little bit of flip-flopping around, but it's to try and cover those areas and trying to then, as far as possible in that sort of order. So you are always working towards the what next and what will you do. As long as you kind of keep that in mind, then you just go with your student or your client as to what you do next. And I mean, just as background, this is something I've started to use in personal tutorials with students, and personal tutorials are often only kind of 20 minutes, 30 maximum. And it's talking to students about what they want to get out of the course, what they want to do after the course, anything that they are struggling with, and it can just be quite a useful framework for that. So Seema, I mean, if you were coming to me as one of my students,
Can I just add something there as well?
Yeah.
When I learnt Grow, we actually practiced it in 10-minute segments with each other, and it's amazing that you can actually get through the whole thing in 10 minutes and someone can get to a bit of a realization. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, but we don't have the time for that, like it can be done in a very compact amount of time. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. You could literally just ask 4 questions.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
There are reams and reams of questions you could ask for each section, or you could just ask one question. And just for a kind of a quick conversation with somebody. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to be the student, right? I don't know how this is going to go, but let's give it a go. So, okay. Do you want to start?
Well, what I would generally start with, and I should say this as a trained coach, that normally I would do a little kind of contract at the beginning, and I would assure you that everything that you said was confidential. Now, obviously, that's not going to apply here, Seema, and this is a role play because and we've got people listening. But just to kind of, we will take that as read, that we have sort of contracted a little bit and talked about how we're going to work together. So that I might just say, well, what's going on for you today? What do you want to bring to this session? What do you need to talk about?
Yeah, so I'm working on my master's thesis at the moment, and I'm just really struggling to prioritize it. Every week I have this weekly reminder in my calendar. Not reminder, sorry. I've got like scheduled time, to work on it. But because I know in my head that I don't have to, it always gets overridden. But then I think that's going to take me to a place where I'm going to end up with a lot of work to do in a very short space of time.
So you've said that you don't have to do it, but what's the end goal here? What are you working towards?
I guess just completing my thesis, and I've got to get it complete in the next 2 months.
Okay, so we've got a time scale here, and you've got something that you definitely want to achieve at the end of it. So what's the kind of current reality at the moment of your work during the week? How are you organizing that? How's that looking?
So I think because I'm teaching, I've got a job and I'm doing this master's degree part-time. I guess that I'm spending a lot of time on my teaching work and then my work outside. And so I guess I'm just never really getting to it. I think there's maybe a little bit of procrastination there as well. I'm just sort of like falling back into my old habits as a student and leaving things to the last minute. Even though I do want to progressively work on it, and I do care about this piece of work, you know, I'm really invested in it, but I'm just struggling to make time for it.
Yeah, I was going to ask that about how much do you care about it? How important is it to you to get this done?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is important, but then I suppose as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, well, if it's that important, then why are you not, you know, really putting the time aside? And I guess I'm sort of telling myself that other stuff is more urgent. And yeah, I think maybe because I'm an introvert, I feel like I'm out of energy now. I don't have any energy to give to this. And I think what it is the thesis involves a lot of thinking. And that's the bit that I'm avoiding. I feel like I don't have time to sit down and think about it.
Yeah, I was going to ask what the barriers are, and you've brought something up there. So it's about something about the thinking time and the sitting and allowing yourself to do that. What else is happening for you with your time? What other demands are there on your time?
I guess like, you know, general routine. I go to the gym on a daily basis, or well, not every day, but I try to go at least sort of 4 or 5 times a week. And then, you know, I'm a big fan of sort of healthy eating, so trying to take time to prepare the meals. And I'm not like a, you know, bulk cook in one day kind of person. I sort of, you know, because that's not the sort of stuff that I'm eating. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's all the like work stuff that I'm doing, and then balancing that with, yeah, you know, gym, healthy eating, and whatever else. And then I need a little bit of downtime as well. So I guess it just feels like there's not enough time in the day to get everything done.
And the other things you've mentioned, so that are obviously important to you, so gym and healthy eating and having some downtime, and obviously you've mentioned you're working as well. How close will they bring you towards the goal that you've mentioned today? How do they contribute to that?
I guess that they just contribute in the sense of like I feel like good food, good mood. And then also with the gym, I feel like when I'm going to the gym regularly, it gives me energy because I feel good about the fact that I've done it. So I think that helps. But then, yeah, I think maybe one of the problems is that all of my energy is there in the morning. So I try and do all the hard things in the morning. And then later in the day, I sort of feel like it's harder for me to sit down and think. But then I want to sort of do the gym in the morning, and I want to do all my hard work in the morning. But then the morning isn't, you know, it's limited.
So, you know, you told me that your goal is that you really want to get the thesis finished, and you've got that 2-month deadline. We've had a little look about what's going on with your time. And how you're spending it, and it's interesting that you've just talked about energy levels and when you've got your most energy, and how you're spending that energy at the moment. So where does that leave you with your options? What direction do you think you could go in to try and solve this problem?
Well, I don't go to the gym every day, as I mentioned. So maybe I can try to schedule this in the morning on the days that I'm not going to the gym. Because I don't need to work on it every day. I just need to give some dedicated time each week. So I suppose that's one thing that I could do.
Yeah. Anything else?
What else could I do? Maybe, well, because I guess there's a lot more than just the thinking. The thinking is one part, but then there's the writing and all of that as well. So maybe I just need to break the tasks up a little bit better and say, okay, I can do the thinking on the morning I'm not going to the gym, but then in terms of other progress towards it, I can try to do that. you know what I could do when I'm at work and I finish, I could stay on at work actually, and I could do it there, because I think the problem is when I travel back and I get into the house, that's when I struggle to go, right, now let me sit down and get into like focused mode again. Whereas I think if I'm already at work, I finished at, I don't know, 4 o'clock, I could easily stay till 5 because I'm already in the zone of working. And then that 1 hour could probably be really productive. I didn't think of that before, actually. I think that's a really good idea.
Well, that's great to hear, because that's an idea that you've come up with. So possible options that we've explored are some dedicated time in the mornings when you're not exercising, that there might be some thinking time around then. And you talked about being spending that time just a little bit more when you're in that work zone, hanging on for an hour rather than going straight home, and getting into back, staying in your focused mind, perhaps doing some of the writing there. So how committed do you think you are to giving those options a go?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, it's sort of holding me accountable a little bit. Yeah, I think I could really commit to the. Well, I mean, I think they're both. I think I could commit to both of them. I feel like they're both realistic options that would work, because I know my whole schedule and I know where my barriers are and where my hang-ups are. I think they're both things that I could realistically execute. And yeah, I think I am committed to them. I'm at least committed to trying.
So if I checked in with you in a month or so, next time we have a chat, you're hoping that would that be okay to kind of report back and see how it's going?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that will probably be helpful, actually, because they'll hold me accountable.
Okay, well, I'm going to step out of coach mode, see if I can step out of student mode. I wonder how you found that from a sort of student role play point of view.
Yeah, I think what was really interesting there was when you asked me the question about how committed are you, and you know what, I sort of couldn't. It did something there, right? Because firstly, it made me realize that I can't just talk. I've got to do something as well. Like, it's all great coming up with these ideas and solutions, but you've got to act on it as well.
Yeah.
So it put that into a different category in my brain, where I went, yeah, well, you're saying it, but are you actually going to do it? And then I think as I talked through how committed I am, I realized that because I had come up with them, I could completely see them happening. Whereas if you had perhaps suggested something to me, I might already have 5 reasons why that's not going to work. But because I had come up with these ideas, I knew that they could work, because I came up with them with all of my circumstances in mind, which you perhaps wouldn't be privy to. So, yeah, I think it really cemented the fact that when someone comes up with the solutions or options themselves, they're much more likely to actually go through and carry them out and follow through with them, which I think is really quite powerful. It's funny, Rebecca, because I didn't know how that was going to go just now. But I think it just reinforces the power of that model, which is so simple, but yet you can stumble upon things even now, right? Like we've been using this for, a good few years, but you can still use it and it can still surprise you.
And there was a moment just in our conversation, and it was obviously a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the GROW model, but there was just a moment where you paused, and I do realise that dead air on radio is a terrible thing, but I wanted to allow that pause to happen, because that is the thinking time, and that's when people will go, oh, do you know what? Actually, I could do this. Oh, and that's when they have that light bulb moment, which is what you're looking for. And you picked up on a point there, which is that I think we are actually all naturally resistant to taking other people's advice.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we see that in all walks of life, that when somebody says, you've got to watch this Netflix program, it's brilliant, you've got to read this book. And I'm sure there's lots of us who at that moment sort of recoil, and that becomes the one Netflix show that we will never watch and the book that we will never read, because there's something about it being thrust upon us by somebody else. And I'm, there's obviously some work to be done there in psychological studies about why we have that reaction. But I do think that it just proves that if I were to say to you, well, why do you have to go to the gym every morning? Why don't you not go? Why don't you? Then that brings my own judgment, my own opinion into it. You're going to be naturally resistant to that.
Yeah. Because I'm going to feel like you don't understand my relationship with that. And, okay, you can say that, but it's very easily, but you don't understand, the importance of that for me. So you're absolutely right. There's so many things, aren't there, here? And did you feel at any point that you wanted to sort of jump in and advise?
Yeah, absolutely. And as soon as you start sort of saying all the things you've got to do, and if somebody's bringing that situation where they're like, well, I've got this really big academic piece of work to do, but I've got to prepare my meals, and there's part of me going, no, you've got to get your thesis done. But saying that is not going to help, and that's not the way that you would approach it. And that's you looking at your own options rather than me, I could say, thrusting an opinion on you. So it makes you shut up and listen, which is sort of what I was saying. And I
really liked the point that you made about the pause and the dead air, because I think that is the point where you have to not jump in and allow, your coachee or your student to sit in the silence, because that's where all the thinking happens. But we're so uncomfortable with silence and dead air that we feel like we need to fill it.
Yes.
But that's where all the kind of magic happens, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, just some of the sort of situations that I've used, I mean, that was a good one about trying to get a piece of academic work done. But, some of the work I've done with students using this as just a sort of conversation tool is, it's just reflecting on, what they're going to do after their degrees, what do they want to do, and what work could they be doing towards that now, and just imagining those possible futures, and students sort of saying, oh, actually, I suppose I could be researching MAs right now. I could be looking into them and see if that is what I want to do, and maybe if I research what jobs are in the field I'm interested in now, when they're in sort of first or second year, that might help take some of the stress away of worrying about what I'm going to do after graduation. But all those, which in a way they're quite little actions, but again, it's quite powerful for a student to think through that for themselves and then to commit to an action. And of course, the trick is that then checking back with them and saying, well, how did that go? And did you do it? And that does take time, and it takes staff time, and we don't always have the time, but sometimes I've just sort of stopped a student in the corridor. Hi, how are you doing? How's it going with the, with the MA research? How's it going with the whatever it is? And so you kind of do those mini check-ins that way, rather than necessarily having to have a formal meeting each time. And I think that can just help keep the students on track with sort of, I would say, minimal intervention from me. And when we're talking about trying to relieve workloads and so on, that's certainly what we want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's also that real power in the questions that you ask. And I think if you want to, anyone that wants to utilize this sort of model, I think, really thinking, really listening, because that's, I guess, what enables the good questions, right? When you just listen, and then you sort of sometimes reflect back what someone's just said, which you did quite a bit there. You sort of reminded me of what I'd been saying, which was quite nice, because sometimes we just have this stream of consciousness, but we don't actually hear ourselves properly. And then you can sort of say, well, you just said this, and I'm going, oh, is that what I said? Sort of thing. but then, yeah, like it's quality over quantity, isn't it? It's not loads and loads of questions. It's the right question at the right point, and it really can. I think the more you practice using it, and you can practice this in daily conversations in any context, right? Like when we're talking to our friends and our partners and our colleagues, and they come to us with something that they're struggling with, sometimes rather than advising them or sort of jumping into that, it's really good to just almost very privately take them through Grow. I mean, I don't know about you, but I did.
Well, I've definitely used this with my children, and which I have to be careful about admitting to on air because I'm not sure they would notice. But
because it's very naturally, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the technique of not jumping in with a solution is a really, really good one to use with teenage and teenage plus, children. That you're not always there with the solution, that you do help help them to think it through. And so I've certainly used that approach when I've had my children being stressed out by exams, by schoolwork, by life, by friendships, all of those things that happen. Sometimes the first question just has to be, well, what do you want out of this? Where are you trying to get to with this? What's the end point? What's the solution that you can envisage? And then have a think about, well, what's actually going on? Well, what would your options be? What could you do? That can work in a conversation where anyone in your life is kind of perhaps asking for advice or just coming to you with a problem. Helping them to find a solution is a very powerful thing to do.
Yeah, and you're sort of gifting them a bit of confidence as well, because when we sort of give them all the answers, we're almost telling them that, whenever you're having a struggle, come to me, I'll give you the answer, and then it'll all be fine. But if you can allow someone to come to you and then in your presence find their own answer, there's something really powerful in that. And, they will eventually come to realize that actually I do have all the answers. I just need the time and the space to find it. And I think the way that life is nowadays, we're always so busy. We just don't have time to think. And coaching is just almost like a space where you can think, in the presence of another person with some, good, powerful questions interjected. But it's really like a space to think. And then when you get used to coming up with your own answers, then you can practice that on your own, and it definitely makes you more confident in your ability to sort of handle life and handle things that are going on.
I think it's quite dangerous to always be handing out advice, particularly to family members who can come back and say, well, that didn't work. I did what you said. And it didn't work. And I'm sure we've all had situations like that. So
if my things don't work, I can't say to you, oh, Rebecca, that was really bad, like it didn't work, because it was me that came up with it. But then it's just a safe space, and you can go, okay, well, maybe let's consider what the other options are. Why don't we try those?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you can keep doing this. If we'd had another meeting, months down the line, and you said, you know what, I'm just not sticking to it. It's not working. So then we'd have to say, well, why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? What else could we do? What might work? What changes do we need to make? Because in the end, the goal hasn't gone away. The goal is still there. So it's kind of what motivates people towards that goal, and what motivates them to act towards it in the end, what they think will work for them.
Yeah, I completely agree. So just a reminder that this show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning. They are publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. So you can level up your professional development today and visit hachetlearning.com to explore their full range of titles. Rebecca, you mentioned that you've been integrating this into tutorials with some of your students, and I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but we actually also launched a coaching program for our MAs this year.
Right.
And it's the first time we've done it, and it's been so interesting. It's been so powerful because it's really helped give us an insight into the students at an individual level, right? And really kind of build stronger relationships with them. But then also when we mark and feedback on their work, we can see the things that they've talked about showing up in the way that they're doing their work. I had this one student, and she, during a bit of coaching, talked to me about how she struggles with this, like, trying to be too perfect with the work and really get it all right, and then she kind of overthinks it, and she's not sure which direction to go in because there's so many different options that are running through her mind, and then she sort of gets it sort of overwhelms her. And when she submitted a piece of work which I was marking, I remember I looked at it, and it was perfectly polished, beautifully designed, really well written. But in terms of the actual content, it was her ideas were very fragmented. And when I saw that, I completely understood why, because I'd coached her. Because I'd used coaching when we had a tutorial, and I'd understood what her sort of mindset was. Whereas if I had read that piece of work and I hadn't had that conversation with her, I definitely wouldn't have been able to link it to anything. I would have just thought, oh, she's just not focused, and ideas are all over the place, and this is what she needs to work on. But I was able to sort of feed back to her in a much more productive way because I understood what was going on. And I know that not everyone is going to have the time to do that, but we all end up having conversations with students here and there. And as you said, it can just be a few simple questions, but it completely shifts the onus and takes the conversation in a different direction, and allows the student to sort of think for themselves for a moment. So yeah, I think it's really, really quite powerful. I'm conscious of time. I don't even know where the hour went.
It's gone very quickly. Yeah,
it's gone really fast. But we always I always ask my guests to do like a quick masterclass at the end of the show, just for our listeners to take something away. So what would be actually great, Rebecca, is if you could do a very quick reminder of Grow, like sort of summary of how it works, so that anyone that wants to use it in their classroom or in their conversations outside as well can use this.
Absolutely. So if you want to remember what GROW stands for and what to do with it, so G is goal. What do you want? Quite obviously, what do you want to get out of this conversation, but also what do you want further down the line? What are you working towards? R is for reality. Where are you now? What's going on? What's happening? And importantly, what barriers are in your way? So really considering what's stopping you getting that goal at the moment. O is for options. So starting to look forward. What could you do? What options are available to you? What directions could you take? How can you conceive of, how to take those next steps? And then W for will, or for what next? What will you do? Will you commit to it? And what are your next steps to make your goal happen? And that's a little bit of testing commitment there as well, about how committed somebody is. So that is your very, very quick and easy guide to Sir John Whitmore's pioneering GROW framework.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Rebecca mentioned, this is a really sort of popular model that's well known in coaching circles, but naturally there's lots and lots of information online about it. And what you might find particularly helpful is to just kind of look up what sort of questions come under each of the areas, right? Because it can give you an idea of these kind of questions can be used to establish the goal, these kind of questions to establish the reality, etc. And when you get your head around that, I think you only sort of have to like look at it a couple of times and then practice it, and then it just becomes second nature. And I think that's the beauty of the model and, its simplicity. So, Rebecca, thank you so much. And it's been so great to have you on the show and to have this conversation on air. I feel like we've just had this conversation, over lunch or something, but it's just flown by really quickly. And thank you for all of your insights and for joining us. Well, I shouldn't have said lunch. It's like 10 o'clock now, isn't it?
Thank you, Seema. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
No worries. Okay. Good night, everyone. And I will see you or speak to you on the next show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.